Have you ever felt like your Barbie was stiff and boring? Too hard to maneuver into casual human poses, and sick of the fact that the only dance she can do is the can-can? Well, with just 40 hours of work and a craft store's worth of materials, you can create the Barbie of your dreams. Be warned that the cutting is more fun than the reassembly. You can even make her an alligator if you want to. Welcome artists, arters, and art appreciators to Art of Lore. This video was prompted by a drawing that I did many years ago of a Barbie-ish alligator anthropomorphic character. And you guys know that I really like anthro characters, and I decided I wanted to make her, and I just so happened to own a Barbie that I didn't want for anything else. So this project started as me just being like, well, what if I just make her face into an alligator? And then I cut her into pieces. So we'll get to that in a second. First, I have to make her head. I did stab her right through the eyes so I can make it symmetrical. I'm sorry if that's kind of scary, but it'll be covered in a minute. The wire is just to anchor the face into the head. And no, I'm actually not de-hairing her or anything. I did contemplate trying to make it so that the Barbie Gator's mouth could open and close, but it just seemed too complicated for this. And I already made it way more complicated than it needed to be. I promise you that. I pretty much made this whole thing with epoxy sculpt. I have not used epoxy in as large quantities as I did here before, mostly because it's really expensive. And so I'll tend to use air dry clay, but air dry clay doesn't stick to plastic as well. So I ended up using the epoxy, and it went pretty well, to be fair. Epoxy is really unique in that it is very soft and sticky at first, and then it slowly hardens over time after you mix the two parts. And there's like a small window of time where it is most easy to use, I always feel. And then it just slowly gets like more and more difficult and can get a little frustrating. But I make my epoxy in very, very small amounts, so I'm just always making like a tiny little sliver and then adding a few things and then waiting for everything to cure for like a few hours or days. Usually it's honestly like a day in between, but you can actually work on it after it's only been sitting for like an hour. And it sticks to itself really well. It actually sticks to plastic like a little too well, because you can already see these little speckles on Barbie's body. Barbie Gator's body, I should say. And those speckles are epoxy that was on my gloves and rubbed off onto the doll. And I thought they would just like peel off, but some of them just like stuck around until the end and I had to scrape them off like they were little pimples. It's really annoying. Oh, I should talk about how I got this Barbie. So I got this Barbie with a selection of two other Barbies, one of which will also show up in this video. But I really just wanted to buy this random holiday Barbie that I found at a Savers, which is like a thrift store. You don't see a lot of holiday Barbies unboxed. If you didn't know, holiday Barbies are like they're like a sort of collectible line of Barbies, but they're not really collectibles that like collectors collect. They're things that were created in the 80s to be collectibles, and so a lot of people left them in box and like never opened them. And because they were so popular, they're actually like very cheap on the secondhand market and very common to see in box. And I've never seen one like out of box somewhere. I think I've seen them like at antique malls, but it was just at a random thrift store, and I was like, well, I could do something with the Barbies in here. I could use them for a project. I think it would be kind of fun to have holiday Barbie and hang on to her. Maybe like restore her, because she's looking a little messy because someone probably actually played with her. She's 1991 holiday Barbie, which is one with like a green dress, which I really like. I have to confess something to you, dear viewers. Close your ears if you're Barbie fans. I don't like modern Barbie dolls very much. The reason why this one in particular was a candidate for completely redoing her face is because I just don't really like modern Barbie's faces a lot of the time. There's something about those like really dark eyelashes and the like small pupils. I don't know. I find modern Barbies unsettling a lot of the time. So I kind of wanted to cover up her entire face. I don't like Barbies very much, although during this project I spent a lot of time looking at old Barbie stuff for reasons I will discuss later. And I realized that I like the older Barbies a lot more, so it makes sense that I would gravitate towards like the 1991 one in general. My childhood was during the 2000s, and I do have a Dorothy Wizard of Oz Barbie. She is the 1999 doll for like when they re-released the Wizard of Oz on VHS or something. I don't know. They like re-released it in some format. And so I was really little when I got that. And my family thought I was obsessed with Wizard of Oz for many years. And I mean, I liked my Wizard of Oz Barbie and my Glinda. I had a Glinda too. But I was more like a Bratz kid because my cousin had Bratz, and I obviously wanted to be like her because she was slightly older than me. So I had a lot of Bratz dolls, and a lot of my memories of playing with my dolls are with my Bratz dolls, not with Dorothy Barbie. I should probably tell you about how I'm actually making the joints for this Barbie. I kind of jumped ahead here. I did all of the joints on one side of the body as like temporary to figure out like how they would work, and then I'm going to do the other ones and show you a little bit more of the process. But all of the joints are pretty much based on this Rainbow High doll I have. Got her at the thrift store too, but I'm not modifying her because I like her more than Barbie. Maybe someday I'll make new clothes for her. But I'm basically making the knees double jointed so they can bend at the like top and bottom of the knee, which is very common in dolls. The top of the thigh will twist, and then of course the arm, elbow, and hand both have rotating hinge joints. So they can both hinge, and the hand can hinge back and forth, and then they can rotate. I even made these little graphics to give you some details. They go by pretty fast, but you can just like slow them down if you really want to do this type of thing with your own doll, because this was just easier than me explaining with the clips that I have. This is just roughly what my process is. I would actually suggest for the knee to maybe sculpt it instead of using like a piece from the actual leg like I did, just because you could make it a little more customized. And then for the elbow, if you wanted it to bend further than just a 90-degree angle, which is what this one's can bend to, I would suggest doing like the double joint like the leg, and then you could also do the twist joint at the top of the arm. A lot of people do that. That's very like action figure oriented. But I decided to just copy what the Rainbow High doll had because that's kind of, it was like a good reference to try this out. I mean, obviously, seen other people articulate dolls. You can go watch Dolliful's videos. She's articulated a lot of dolls before. I didn't see one specifically for Barbie. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. There's so many Barbies, but also, like, I don't think the Barbie customizing scene tends to do this because, of course, Barbies have made-to-move bodies, which are, like, extra bodies that have all sorts of joints, like, more joints than even this particular doll. And, I don't know, when I mentioned that I was doing this, and that it was quite annoying, at a point where I was very frustrated in the project. Not that I'm unhappy with this project, but it was just, it got frustrating after a while. Someone asked why didn't I buy a made-to-move body? And my answer is just, I don't do projects like that, really. Like, that's not how this project came about. In fact, I was only going to articulate her at the knees, and then I just kept cutting. But also, I use what materials I have. That's why I don't, like, rehead things onto like other dolls. I don't have that many dolls. I like hand make most of my dolls and then customize a few others, but by and large, I'm not a person with like a big box of dolls in their closet that they can just like pull out different parts. Also, I mean, I could just have given this Barbie back to the thrift store, but I mean, I figured I might as well do something to make her something I'd like since she's in my hands. It's definitely like a fun project to flex what I can do. But also there are just like so many blonde Barbies. There are so many. With like no clothes. I think she came with like a black dress that I thought was a sock at first. But it had like a vinyl band sewn in the chest. But barely a dress. I don't know what they're doing with Barbie clothes these days, but basically no clothes. So that's why I decided to go with the making everything and doing all this big stuff, was just because I have her and I can. And I don't know, it's a fun experiment. The point is not to have a Barbie alligator, the point is to make a Barbie alligator, you know? And yes, it did take quite a long time, but you know, I learned things along the way. Oh, also, the plastic that the legs are made of did not stick to all of the parts of the epoxy. Like I said, the epoxy stuck really well to the body, but not so much to the inside of the legs. So I suggest you use some sort of really strong glue if you really want pieces to stick and they seem like they're not. Definitely some parts, like, around the thigh, like, those did just fine because I smoothed them in really strongly, but areas like the knee, they popped off. The thigh joint is probably the part of the project that I'm least happy with, partially because it is quite gappy, despite the fact I tried to minimize the gap as much as possible. And also, they're just a little bit wobbly. I never felt like the legs were super secure. So I tried my best to like add lots and lots of glue to them, but despite that, they still kind of wobbled. So if you have any better ideas for how to do that, I'm all ears. The arm rotating joints went really well because the arms are made of vinyl, and all I did was stick a wire into holes that I made in the vinyl, and it's sort of, the vinyl is like sticky enough or like flexible enough that it can stick in place and rotate really well, but I had to sort of make my own contraption for the leg. As you can see, I started painting before everything was completely entirely finished, but also this was important because I wanted to paint everything and then seal it and then put her like together, because I knew that the edges of the paint are where it's most likely to rub off. So I figured that if I could seal things up with like layers of matte varnish, they might be less likely to peel. I did also sort of, I don't think I got any footage of this, but I carved out some parts of her leg and torso where they would bump together to try and reduce peeling. It's not entirely reduced. There's definitely parts on her shoulder and thigh where the paint is peeling off. I mean, it's very difficult to make a doll like this and use just like acrylic paints and varnish and not have something peel off. So it is what it is. It is covered up by the clothes at the end of the video. Oh, and this first layer of color is a little bit lighter than the one I'll be going with later. So let's just do a little montage of me finishing up some of the paint, and I'll see you in a minute. It is now time for Barbie Gator's face and eyes and everything. At this point, she was really starting to remind me of my anthropomorphic draft character, who has both gradients and spots on her face that are going to be fairly reflected in Barbie Gator. But I just started by going in and sort of dry brushing things on. There are kind of two methods you can use when trying to keep paint really thin. And one of them is the one I was using earlier, where I had thinned out the paint quite a bit with water and then painted that on repeatedly in like many thin layers. And then the second one is doing like a little bit of sort of dry brushing, where you basically keep very little paint on your paintbrush. I'm not doing like the truest of dry brushing here, but what I tend to do is like get a little bit of paint down on my, I guess, canvas, and then wipe some off of a paintbrush, sometimes a different paintbrush, and then sort of like blend it outwards. That's just how I kind of prefer to blend acrylic paints on a surface that's not flat. Because if you blend them on a flat surface, then you can kind of make it all watery, but if you try to blend a watery thing on top of a 3D surface, it might just roll off. So you can see once I did the gradients, by the way, sorry for the blurriness of the focusing. It's a little bit difficult to get her always in shot, partially just because her nose is so big, so then sometimes the nose will be blurry and the rest of the face like wasn't, and then I would move her around and stuff, so yeah. Still working on my camera work, I suppose. But after I did the gradient, I added like little scale details. They're not 100% accurate to real alligators, but I did notice that real alligators, you know, have a lot of prominent scales near their jaws, so that's sort of influencing it. Oh, I meant to mention this earlier, but alligators do have ears. They're slits behind their eyes. So I did give Barbie Gator those slits to show that she has ears, but I covered up the original ears. And I know this whole sort of sculpt looks kind of like a face mask, but I wanted it to be so that the seams were quite hidden in case anything cracks in the future. Like, her entire face is one big piece. So yeah, everything should be really nicely together once it's sealed, so that if anything did crack, it would hopefully be fine. You can see I'm doing sort of an aggressively pink eye, and I actually did plan out my colors in advance, and they have a very specific inspiration for Barbie Gator. I spent a bunch of time researching old Barbie clothes. I had originally drawn Barbie Gator in like a sort of 80s inspired athleisure type of outfit, and I just began thinking, like, could I find an authentic Barbie vintage outfit and copy based off that, so that she would have like stronger inspiration based on the Barbie, like the vintage Barbie branding. So I wanted to look up 80s clothes, but instead of looking up 80s clothes, I somehow ended up looking at 60s and 70s clothes, and I really liked one specific piece of clothing, which was a dress, which we'll get to the clothing in a minute, but it's a little bit earlier of an era, but it's both earlier of an era than I made Barbie Gator, and it's later of an era that I was planning to sort of make her visually inspired by, because I actually sculpted the eyelashes thinking of the original Barbie, the 1959 Barbie sculpt, because her eyelashes were heavily sculpted. So that's why I did the sculpted eyelashes. But I hadn't decided a color scheme until I saw the 1970 Walking Jamie doll, which was a Sears exclusive Barbie. So I made a very simple Barbie dress, which you can see here on our model, Brooklyn, who is also from the thrift store. She's the other Barbie who was with Holiday Barbie. And she looks very good in this dress, but I have to take it off of her and color it for our alligator. I decided to go with trying to color it with marker instead of acrylic paints, because those are the two options I had, and I don't like how acrylics make things all crusty. Of course, coloring in marker has its own risks. It is probably prone to staining, and I bet it will fade a lot faster. But, you know, that's my business, what I do with my markers. So if you draw on fabric with markers, also know that it could potentially damage the marker. I have so many markers that I'm not super worried about that. In fact, I have like so many that are so old that I'm worried that they'll dry out eventually, so I just use them for whatever projects, and I thought this would be a fun experiment. It definitely has the risk of being kind of splotchy, and you'll see that there was sort of an error made with the back of the dress here. But that's fine. I started with the back because there might be errors. I did also have the markers go through a little test on the fabric where I like rinse them with water, and then I also wash them with soap, and that didn't leave any like running stains or anything. Like nothing bled because it's alcohol marker. I did soak them in OxyClean and they started running a little bit, but I have fabric markers and they ran just as much as the normal markers. So I'm just going to say that's the power of OxyClean and not the marker's fault necessarily. They seem to be pretty strong at staining fabric. Just like I said, I guess probably not the most ideal thing to recommend to people. But I needed her to have a pattern just like the original Walking Jamie doll. But as you can see though, on the back, the orange did bleed into the yellow. But I fixed that on the front, don't worry, the front will look good. The back is just a little bad. I also took the strap off of a mask in order to make her little belt, so it has like a nice texture, like similar to the original belt, although it's a bit thicker. And then we're back to our model, Brooklyn, and she's got some little booties on, some little tape booties, and these are going to be the basis for the little shoes that Barbie has. I've never really made shoes like this for a doll. I mean, I didn't really make this in the traditional way that I've seen people do it, where like sometimes they do like paper mache or something like that. I pretty much just use these tape booties as structural support, which might seem kind of weird, but you'll see in a second, most of the booties are made out of fabric, which I just sewed on. It's actually, the fabric for the dress and the boots are made from an old pair of leggings that I tore apart for art projects. So yeah, this just, the dress was like the ribbed part of the leggings, and then the boots are like a different part of the leggings. Yeah, I sewed them up and then I put them around the little extra booties to, like I said, give them like some structure so they're just not, like, they're just a little thicker. And I had already made the soles of the boots out of epoxy, so all I had to do was like hot glue the bottoms on, and I used plenty of hot glue on the bottom so that it would sort of leach through the fabric and stick the little tape booties onto the bottom. So the tape booties are stuck to the fabric. They like won't really come off, especially because I painted all over them. Of course, I wanted her to have orange boots like the original. I painted them while they were on Barbie, but I put like plastic on her legs to protect her. Even though she's technically just my model Barbie, I felt kind of bad about painting on her. I actually kind of grew attached to this Barbie while I was using her for this project. Like I said, not really a fan of modern Barbie faces, but I was thinking maybe I could do like a slight repaint and give her clothes instead of completely disassembling her like I did for Alligator Barbie. She has like a different face mold, and I just like it a bit more than the one that like the blonde Barbie had. I don't know. I guess let me know what you think if you want to see like just a simpler custom. I also like the fact that she has braids, but I could make an alligator Barbie with braids, or like a crocodile to go with the alligator. By the way, my alligator Barbie is an alligator. Alligators tend to have their top rows of teeth showing, not the bottom rows. whereas crocodiles will have both rows of teeth. So that's how you can tell in her case, because I know she has kind of a thin face, but it's just because she's youthful, like a baby alligator. But she's a teen alligator, like teen Barbie. Tiny Barbie belt. We love a tiny Barbie belt. Just imagine how difficult it was for me to sew the entire dress when this is the struggle I go through for the belt. I made a tiny wire buckle to go with the belt. And the tiny wire buckle I just ended up gluing in place at the end, but I did tuck it between the two pieces of elastic, so hopefully it's like pretty secure where it's glued in place. I think on the original, the belt was just like sewn in. It was a little bit of like a different belt. I don't know, I just went with my gut and like what I felt like looked like it made sense. You do put it on separately from the dress, and it changes the look of the dress, the belt that she has on, because it is like quite elastic, so it pulls in the dress quite a bit, and I made the dress sort of a looser, boxier fit to match the original sort of aesthetic, that like late 60s aesthetic. Thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Retro Geek Crafts, Serendipity, Gabby Rose, and Luca. If you like my art and you want to see more of it, you can like and subscribe. And if you have access to a 3D printer, you might want to check out my Cults 3D, where I have various 3D models. And Ko-fi supporters get access to 3D models early and exclusive 3D models. I hope you enjoyed this rather long and difficult process of making Alligator Barbie and also just articulating a Barbie, and also replicating a vintage outfit, because of course I had to make things even more complicated. The surprise for this Barbie is that she has a little poodle friend. That was part of one of the kits with the walking Jamie, is she had like a little poodle, so I made my Barbie a little poodle. It's made out of wire so it can pose, and clay, and it's flocked on the face. So, fun little surprise. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to curl the hair, so I just kind of tucked it back. I was worried that the forehead would be a bit much, but since her best angle is from the side anyways, you don't really notice the giant forehead. It's fine, I think. I think this is the first project I've had where I'm more happy with the clothes than the like body work, although I am really happy with the head and how that turned out, but the joints are very wobbly. They're kind of a work in progress. But you know, it's my first time making joints and articulating something, and she can hold some poses. It's just some of the like leg poses will not hold unless it's sort of like while she's balancing on something. But that's okay. Definitely a learning experience. Room to improve, and yeah, I hope you enjoy the project and have a nice day and all, or week, or weekend, and such. And see you later. Bye-bye. Bye.